Booktube, it's Amy. I'm back with another reading from the private papers of A Bankrupt Bookseller by Will Y. Darling. Today we are on page 92, and we're beginning with a section titled Almost an Advertisement. How dull and flat was yesterday. It rained. There was a sour smell from my backyard. The cat was out all night and I had to get out of bed to let her in by the door. She scratched and meowed so loudly. There were unpleasant letters in both morning and afternoon post. A man from a debt collecting and dunning society called on me. No one, no day, could be duller or more miserable. And yet, this morning I have read the Daily Mail over my cocoa. I'm warmed with the feeling how wonderful life was yesterday to the young men on the Daily Mail. I was depressed and downcast. But what bright happenings they found in London and St. Bury St. Edmunds, in Nice and in Tokyo, these young men on the Daily Mail. I was dunned for the debt and badgered by creditors, but they found men and women gloriously independent, even profligate, these young men in the Daily Mail. My life yesterday was hell, and I thought that the whole creation was groaning and travailing with me. This morning, I know it was a foul, pestilential illusion. Life yesterday was really large, gay, expanding, glorious to the young men of the Daily Mail. Selah. And the next section is titled Books on Travel and Guidebooks, which, as I mentioned in my last video, are some of my favorite armchair reading. Today I have been looking at a book called The Happy Traveler. It is written by a vicar, and it is subtitled A Book for Poor Men. I see it has gone through many editions. I had to get the book for a young man who has great possessions, and, as my dead mother used to say, he doesn't know what he would be at. His, I suppose, is a sad story. His father was a self-made businessman who made a big fortune by his own efforts from very small beginnings, and who died of overwork and worry in the early 50s. He left a wife who is an incurable invalid and one son. They are rich, very rich, but John is bound to his mother's bedside. He was brought up soft and solitary. He has no calling. He is kindly and affectionate. He loves his mother uncritically. She's the only creature he knows. She is dependent on him for company, indeed for everything except money. And there they are. John fancies he would travel. He hurled a chunk of Kipling at me the second time I saw him. But his mother can't, and he can't leave her. He is tied to his mother's apron strings, not literally, for she doesn't wear an apron. Where are they gone, these lovely aprons to whose strings a man might be happily tied? I remember my mother had a black satin apron, a pleasing thing, so sedate, so comforting, a veritable lap of luxury. The Happy Traveler is a good book to read, even if one never travels. It seems to be written by a man who knows how. It is practical rather than romantic. It is Baedeker or Muirhead rather than Walt Whitman, but John will never act on its counsels. He will stay and be faithful unto death, and may very probably be married by the capable nurse who just now manages the household for both of them. Travel books are not in great demand with me. One can't keep everything, and the would-be travelers I see come in so impetuously that I am always taken unawares. Who, for example, among all the booksellers keeps the Canary Islands, their history, natural history, and scenery, on account of an ornithologist's camping trips to the archipelago? I had it a fortnight ago, specially procured for a queer bird, no pun intended, who told me to get it for him. The book costs him, not me, 30 shillings, and I would not have you think lightly of it. The pictures, plain and colored, are extremely good, ranging from washing clothes at Gumar to a colored drawing of a Canarian, strange word, titmice. It is a book written by an ornithologist, but his interests fly wide of mere birds. There is history and geology in the book, a real entertainment for a man like me, who now would never travel. I want to travel all the time. Books dare, I write the heterodoxy of my trade, the sin for which a good bookseller ought to go to the stake. Yes, books are a mighty poor substitute for life. In the dullish hour that followed my tea, I went over my travel books, the local guides, the blue guides, a few Baedekers, Wardlock's tourist handbooks, and so on. Then my pilgrimage took me to the sentimental journey, and I felt thrilled with Belloc's The Path of Rome and John Gibbon's Tramping to Lourdes. Would the real journeying thrill me so much? I doubt it. Too many cooks have spoiled the broth, and birds of a feather too much flock together for a lonely and solitary loving bookseller. At the end of the day, I wrote this poem. The dilemma which lies astride my mind after these thoughts all day on books of travel finds expression. As I wrote it, I was a boy again in the house in which I was born, yearning for the big world, yet at bottom fearful of leaving the home I knew. I want to travel, see the strange, the wonderful. I want to range the roads and sail those seas they say are God's, and yet I want to stay here in this house, so close, so small, marking the fungus on the wall, peering at flies and bumblebees, staring at birds and watching trees, small mysteries of death and birth, all things tiny, all things small. I want to understand them all. And yet the great large world it calls me to. What is a silly fool like me to do? What's a silly soul like me to do? Go to bed and pray that the old bird will call for his book on the Canary Islands tomorrow? Some days later, I find this sheet of paper partly written on top of what is now a growing pile in the cupboard. He came, the ornithologist, and got his book. He paid for it, for which I was glad. He might go a long way away, and forget about me and my bills, which I have to meet for the books I sell. The same day I sold Tennyson by asking a young man if he had read Ulysses. He hadn't, and I sent him away with the Globe edition of Tennyson. I think Ulysses somehow quite out of Tennyson's line, though I am sure it is unequaled. When my youthful customer had gone, he bought an Edgar Wallace and a Phillips Oppenheim. I reproached myself for not having shown him Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, the Weekend Book, The Sentimental Journey, The Footpath Way, The Open Road, The Path to Rome, Tramping to Lourdes. I have them all in stock. I reproached myself, but now I reproach myself for greed. It was that desire to sell that made me reproach myself. Damnation, I am becoming a shopman. I must remember my high calling. I am a bookman, not a bookseller. He will come again with Ulysses. He cannot rest from travel. And the next section here is called Quite, with quite in quotes. Of course I feel life is futile. I feel how little God knows mankind, if he offers us as a prize life eternal. Who wants more of what they have already had too much? I write these blasphemous things because I think them. I feel better now. A lawyer has been in and told me he values my opinion on books more than the reviews. He says I have a feeling for books. I recommend him Buddenbrooks and Magic Mountain, and he enjoyed them apparently. I am not sure that life eternal would be so distasteful to me. I would be congeniously circumstanced. I would be clothed, of course, and in my right mind. I would be understood. It is so terrible not to be understood. This man keeps saying to me when I blather about myself and what I think of books, I understand, I understand. When I am unusually chaotic, and it is obvious I don't at all understand myself, he is equal to the occasion. He then almost unctuously says, quite, and after a pause he again says, quite. Balm in Gilead could not be more gratifying than the benignity of that second quite. And let's see. The next section is rather long, so I think we're going to leave it at that for this video. But in the next video, we will read through the lives of great men all remind us. And that will be followed up by book titles and possible publishers. So I hope you enjoyed today's reading.